Welcome to Exploring Digital with Purr, a podcast for entrepreneurs and CEOs who want their businesses to benefit from a digital-first approach. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Exploring Digital with Purr. I'm joined today by Laura Hampton, who's the head of digital PR at Impression. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Nick. I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Very well, yes. So for background for the listeners and viewers, it turns out Laura and I have met a very long time ago, but in a skydiving drop zone bar.
In a whole other world.
In a whole other world, in another era. And Laura has continued her skydiving career and turned into, what, semi-professional, would you call yourself?
Yeah, that's probably fair to say. I compete with my team at a national and international level. And you've gone down a slightly different route, haven't you, Nick? You've gone the business and family route.
Of not jumping out of, exactly, out of not jumping out of any planes whatsoever for a very long time, which was very regrettable in all sorts of ways. But thanks for joining. And do you want to kick us off by telling everyone a little bit about Impression and your background and how you came into that role?
Yeah, for sure. So thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to catch up with you again and have a chat to you for your listeners. I have been working at Impression for the past 6 years now, which is essentially since the agency started. So we're a digital marketing agency with offices in Nottingham and London. We work with brands across the UK and internationally. And we were founded by two guys called Tom and Aaron back in 2012, who ran the agency as an SEO and web development agency for the first couple of years as sort of a side hustle to their main jobs. And in 2014, started to grow the brand and grow the team full time. So we've gone from that point where there were just two founders to today where there's around 60 of us. We do everything, including digital PR, SEO, paid media. We've got an analytics and CRO team and kind of everything in between. And we work with some amazing brands from kind of global beauty brands like Clarins, and we work with kind of massive homes and interiors brands right through to some big B2Bs and the likes of cancer researchers, charities as well. So yeah, we do all of that, and hopefully I can share some insights with you today that will be useful.
That's fascinating. So really kind of meteoric rise, going from 2 to 60 in just a handful of years. And so you said you've been there pretty much since the beginning of that growth trajectory.
Yeah, that's right.
What's that been like to be on the sidelines, spectating that growth and driving it, no doubt, as well in your department?
Yeah, it's been like you say, it's been a pretty meteoric rise, but at the same time, a huge amount of hard work has gone into achieving it. And I think that you can't underplay the contributions of every single individual to that evolution. I mean, when I started, there were 6 of us. And the reason that I joined Impression, I was working at another digital marketing agency, and I could see what Tom and Aaron were doing and the team they were starting to build. And my perception as an outsider was that what they were doing was much more agile, much more responsive to the needs of clients, much more results driven and a lot of fun, a lot of creativity, which was quite a difference to where I was at the time and agencies that I'd worked at previously. And that was what initially excited me. And it was an opportunity for me to join in with that whole ethos of building something better and contribute my ideas to it. But where it was then going to go may have had us kind of at the beginning of it, but every step of the journey, every new addition to the team has brought another facet to that way of thinking. So I think it's evolved in ways that we couldn't possibly have expected on day one. And it's really exciting to know that evolution is going to continue as we get bigger.
Absolutely. So it's been a team effort throughout. I mean, do you think, has the culture changed dramatically? I mean, it's impossible to know, isn't it? The impact that growth will make to a company culture. Does it still have the same feel? Is it still the kind of exciting, agile business? Or has it evolved from that position and it's even more?
Yeah, I mean, culture's been a big focus for us the whole way through, because we knew from those very early days that the culture we were building and the ethos and the values that we had were what stood us apart from other agencies. And they were the things that were gaining attention from clients as well as potential colleagues. So for us, it was really important that we protect that, but not that we were so fiercely protective that we didn't allow it to adapt to the changing needs of new people coming on board, and also the changing landscape. The way that people market their brands these days is so different to back then. So the things that we have really fought to protect are kind of the core essence of what we're all about. So I mentioned being very results focused, being very customer centric. All of those things have remained completely core to who we are, but we've done a lot of work to formalize that much more. So we had a branding consultant talk to us about our mission and our values and our aims and our beliefs. And we've done a lot of consultation across the whole team. So yeah, I think we've kept that core essence of just building something better and having fun along the way, but we've tried to allow that to be agile to the needs of our team as it grows.
So historically, big corporate brands have always struggled a little bit to communicate purpose without seeming trite. Is there a set of principles that you follow when you're trying to help a big brand communicate purpose in a meaningful way?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a few things that help us. So the first one, and this is going to sound very fluffy, but the first one is to really have clarity over what that purpose is. And what I mean by that is to have what you are trying to communicate clearly documented. Now, that could be something like a simple kind of tone of voice guideline. It could be a brand manifesto. Perhaps you've developed something like a brand persona. But whatever it is, if you are a brand that wants to be clear on your purpose, you need to create that consistency across all of your communications platforms. So having a real definition around your purpose is kind of step one. That also helps us from the agency side of things. So if we're working with a client and we don't have that clarity of definition, it's very difficult for us to then mirror that purpose through the communications that we put out there. So making sure it's well defined is really the first step. That comes down to knowing what you're all about as a brand, but also what your audience is going to be interested in, and really tying those things together. So you mentioned there, Nick, how some brands struggle with communicating purpose and not appearing trite. I think that only occurs where authenticity is lost. And authenticity is lost when you can't practice what you preach. So if you're putting something out there because you think that's kind of the trendy value of the moment, and we'll probably get a few hits and a few bits of traffic if we talk about this one thing, but you don't actually believe it at your core, that's where the struggles come into play. So something that can be quite helpful in that is maybe to take the approach of what we'd call solutions-based marketing. That works quite well for us when we're coming up with PR ideas, for example, whereby you look at what is the problem that we want to highlight that is pertinent to our audience, and how can we provide or create a solution to that problem. So it's not just kind of empty messaging to say, look at this thing that's newsworthy and that's shocking. It's actually saying, look at this thing and look at how we can either create a solution together or look at what we've already got that can help to solve that. So it really is giving tangible action, not just empty words.
Yeah, I think there's a culture, or has been a culture, or lack of culture, of sort of presenteeism almost, of just going, oh, well, let's have a pride float, or let's change our Instagram picture for Black Lives Matter, or whatever the subject that week that's in the news is. And if there isn't a wider business strategy around that topic, then it's always going to seem artificial,
Yes.
I guess. So are those the ones where you're seeing the biggest mistakes nowadays? Is it in the sort of the lack of authenticity in something someone's communicating, or are there still other failures big brands make in a major way along those lines?
I think in terms of mistakes, authenticity is definitely a big issue. And you've mentioned a few examples there where it might feel like the right thing to do in the moment to you. And it might well come from a very good place. It might be that social media manager or that PR manager has got personal feelings towards an issue that they want to kind of use the platform that their brand has created to communicate. But if that doesn't get followed through by the brand, it feels like a marketing strategy. And that's not a good place to be. You don't want to turn global issues or societal challenges into a marketing opportunity for yourself. Equally, on the flip side to that, though, you have to recognize that as your brand is growing, you do have a platform. You have built yourself a platform from which to communicate. And it can be almost as much of a mistake to not take those opportunities to champion a cause or to try and make a difference, as it is to jump on something when you don't have a valid platform to do so. So it's a difficult line, and I think it's something that's become exacerbated through the COVID pandemic as people have been reflecting on what drives them, what their own personal values are. And from a marketing perspective, I think consumers are more driven than ever to consider how the brands that they interact with and brands that they buy from help to support their own values and support their own aspirations. So I think that brands are going to have to be clear on that moving forward more than ever before.
Completely. I feel there are so many kind of missteps that are in effect counterproductive. You know, we've just been through International Women's Day, and in our sector in particular, you know, diversity in teams has always been an issue, and may continue to be an issue for the foreseeable. And you know, lots of people in our sector will kind of going, oh, you know, pushing the women in their teams to the front of the picture and going, you know, aren't we great to have women in our teams? And really, all it does is reinforce how few women they have in their teams. It's not like it really helps the situation, and it just seems like grandstanding.
And change
and it would
doesn't
be
come.
far better to have. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say change doesn't come straight away either, and I think without kind of delving too much into those much bigger issues at the moment, the challenge is in identifying what you can do that is making an actual impact and making an actual difference. I mean, for us at Impression, we can't go out there and say we're going to make the country a safer place for women walking home at night, because we can't affect that. But what we can do is say that for every event when we get back to normal and we can meet up in person, for every event that we hold, we'll make sure that every member of the team it gets home safely, and we'll kind of cover the cost of taxis to make sure that that happens. Or when we look at issues like diversity and inclusion, we can't unfortunately snap our fingers and change the way the industry is within a day, but we can do things like reviewing our own recruitment practices, having consultations as we have done around our own existing diversity and inclusion, and also looking to the future. So some of the things that we do as an agency includes going into underprivileged schools or less kind of represented schools and educating students around potential opportunities in our industry, looking at how we can support initiatives like Women in Tech. And every step of the way, whether you're Impression or any other brand really, it's thinking, what difference can we tangibly make? And authenticity for me comes from actually doing something about it. It's not just jumping on
having a
issues as a
social
marketing
purpose
thing.
as well as a business one.
100%, yeah.
So let's focus. We mentioned tech a little bit there. When you're putting together, I mean, you're involved in digital PR primarily. So is technology, you know, the choice of technology or the choice of platform playing a big part in these early strategic discussions, or is it still an afterthought for a lot of these big brands? It's what's the campaign and roll it out on the platforms.
I think there are lots of different factors that go into kind of our campaign ideation. And the thing that I really keep on coming back to is about finding the technology or the communications platform that is most appropriate for the audience, as well as for the brand. So, you know, it's all well and good to see that social media platforms like TikTok have really grown over the past year in popularity. But if that's not where your audience is already hanging out, or if that's not the kind of place they're going to be comfortable, then you don't want to be jumping onto it. Equally with things like Clubhouse, a lot of people jumped on that when it was launched, but was it appropriate for everybody? Maybe not. But equally being conscious of technologies that have been around for a long time. You don't always have to be innovating. You know, we work with a big brand that deals with business SMS, for example, and as we're trying to reach more consumers in their homes, as we are at the moment, SMS is still very much a valid way of communicating. Email marketing is still very valid. Considerations around, you know, mobile devices and different technologies, Facebook's new portal, all that kind of thing is exciting. But again, I think it's really coming back to what's most appropriate to the audience, and communicating in a way that's going to be compelling to them.
Yeah, so it's not just being on the zeitgeist and having the quickest adoption of a new platform, but actually thinking about its suitability to your brand.
Exactly, yeah. Being open to the options, but not just jumping on every bandwagon that comes past because you think it would be cool to do so. Yeah.
No, very good. And so when you've got this strategy about, you know, picking the right digital platform for the brand, for the purpose. What are the other ways in which, is a niche approach, I guess, for impression as an agency? Are there any other specifics about your digital PR angle that you think are, unique to you guys?
Gosh, big question. I think digital PR, particularly in recent years, has evolved quite a lot. I've been in the industry for about 12 years now. So when I started in digital marketing, this whole thing that we now refer to as digital PR was just a part of SEO. It was link
Hmm.
building. It was kind of quite simplistic. It was all built off this idea of referencing it, and it came actually from academia, and the idea of citing your sources and things was what kind of drove those link connections. And over the years, we've developed more innovative, more creative approaches to earning links and to earning mentions from other brands. And in more recent years, we've looked at what traditional PRs have been doing for many years now and gone, oh, hang on, that's quite a good way of getting attention as well, isn't it? So we started to roll PR practices into things more than ever before as well. So what we've got as a team at Impression is a combination of people who come from an SEO background, people who come from a traditional PR background, and people who come from a digital PR background. And all of that kind of amalgamates together to make who we are today. In terms of
Yeah.
the
But to,
approaches
to,
that
to
we
help make it more of its own specialism rather than just an assortment of other skills.
Yeah, for sure. But also the recognition that we have as a business that this is a discipline that is still evolving is something that's quite important to us, because what that means is that when we recognize that it's not a finished product, we can always be looking for new ways to improve it or to enhance what we already do. So we are in an incredible position where we work with some amazing brands and we achieve some exceptional successes. And I couldn't be more proud of the team that we've built. And at the same time, we are always looking at how can we bring the next thing to that. And there are three, I guess, main drivers to that. The first is that we want to deliver what we term measurable gains. Now, what that means is that there are many ways to do PR that are very difficult to measure. Specifically, when you look at things like traditional PR, metrics like kind of coverage that's being picked up, or circulation figures, or proxies like advertising value equivalents are quite outdated and quite kind of far removed from the actual value that they deliver for the brand. So we're always looking at
Mhm.
what can we do to make sure that we are measuring the actual gains that our clients are getting out of their investment with us. So that's one thing. The second thing that drives our more unique approach, I suppose, is the pursuit of broader benefits. And what I mean by that is that we recognize that it's no longer just about link building. It's no longer just an SEO discipline. There are much broader benefits to investing in digital PR than those things. So we are open to exploring, things like social engagements or sentiment, or how we can be helping brands to build, or even looking at kind of audience data acquisition, and the whole wide spectrum of ways that we can measure success. And the third thing for me that really differentiates us is that I would call us strategic specialists. So every member of my team is 100% a specialist in what they do, but they're also able to take that strategic approach to it. So there have been cases where a client will be coming to us and they will just ask for digital PR, but because we're able to kind of step that level up and look overarching at what the goals are of the business, we can turn around and say, actually, it's not just digital PR that's going to help you achieve that, and why don't we consider these other things as well? So even if somebody comes to us and just says, we want some digital PR, let's get some links, we will help them to identify how that can better impact and influence their strategy as well.
Yeah, I completely agree on that last one. Always getting kind of what's outside the brief, and should that impact what we're doing with this specific brief is so
100%.
important.
And so much of that comes
Especially,
down to knowing what the goals are as well. So one of the questions that we always ask is, what are we trying to achieve? What does success look like? What does good look like? And if that success and that good isn't necessarily achieved solely through digital PR, that's where we want to make sure that we open those conversations around other activities that will help our clients get to the end point that they want to.
yeah, understood. So, because you've got this team of specialists, and you've been able to grow that, from your starting days at the business. I mean, seems like you mentioned this meteoric growth. Generally, what we see is with agencies that have grown super quickly in that way, more than kind of 30% growth in a year, is the biggest struggle is sort of keeping a consistent quality of delivery, and ensuring that standard and that understanding of your approach is consistent across everyone you bring in and have to induct and scale up. You mentioned the business is really agile. What do you think the things the business has done really well to ensure that doesn't become an issue?
So there are two things that come to mind. The first one is that we do not template everything that we do, and the reason that I say that is that I've seen it at agencies that I've worked with before, and I've seen it brand side when I've worked brand side as well. Is that you start off with a small group, or you start off with an idea of the way that you want to do things, and the success of that way of working actually comes from the ability to change it on the fly and to deliver something bespoke to the client. So what we never wanted to do as an agency at Impression is to just template everything in a way that becomes prohibitive of innovation and creativity, because every single person that joins our team brings a new way of doing things and a new way of thinking, and we want to allow that innovation and evolution to happen. So we don't template the ways of doing things in kind of a strict way, but some things that we do template would be things like we have something called a brand and channel plan, where we define what the key drivers are, the key strategic drivers for the client. We define and document things like what the purpose is for the client, what the client wants to be known for, how they want to measure things. So there are some things that have to be set in stone so that you know what success looks like. But then there are other things where the way that we do things can be suggested to our colleagues, but are very much open for that agility and dynamicism, all the jargon that means that we can be much more kind of delivering to what our clients need in the moment as well.
Okay, no, good principles. It's always horrible when you hear someone say, "Oh, it's done that way," because it's always been done that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've always got to be prepared to improve or try new things, and yet, you know, keeping a company growing successfully and improving your reputation has to be, yes, it's still going to be done to the same standard, and we may still have to do what we would normally do, even if we're going to test other things alongside it.
Yeah, and it's just not sustainable either, I don't think. If you want to be so dictatorial of the way that things should be done that you almost have to micromanage every person, that's not conducive to scaling either. So we have to make sure that we've given everyone what they need, and almost this, people use the term North Star, which I struggle with because it is so jargony, but you do give them kind of like, this is the point we're trying to get to, and the route that we're going to take is going to look roughly like this, but allow everyone to find their own kind of ways of doing that and of achieving that. And that's something that we're really proud of, because it means that everyone in the team is continually developing and we're still delivering great standards of work for our clients.
But I think being super clear on your purpose as an organization can only help that.
Yeah, sure.
Because if everyone understands sort of the brand mission to begin with, then at least if people extrapolate outside what their normal way of doing things, it should be aligned with it.
Definitely.
Bigger brands, perhaps not as kind of, well, definitely not as agile, definitely more risk averse. Does that tend to be the limitation that you're given when you're trying to work with someone? Is it that they won't be edgy enough, or they won't try new things?
Not necessarily, no. I think we're quite clear on our own brand ethos, and our vision for the future is a world where ambitious brands are rewarded. So we really want to work with brands that have that ambition to grow, and that could be global brands who are already huge and they want to grow more, or it could be kind of smaller businesses who've got really big plans and big aspirations. So we want to work with aspirational, ambitious brands, and that's quite clear through the way that we communicate our own offering. And that means that we get the opportunity to work with those kinds of businesses. So it's rare that we are held back by brands saying, "Oh no, we're too nervous to try something, or we're too scared to give that thing a go." I think what actually are the biggest limiters for us are budget, as an example. So, if somebody is wanting to do a kind of a massive PR stunt and they want to build something massive, or they want to do something huge, and they've seen, I don't know, some enormous global brand with millions and millions of pounds to spend do it, and they come to us and say, oh, we want to do the same. That can be quite difficult once you start digging into the practicalities of making that happen.
Yeah.
But of course, once you know what success looks like and you know what that budget limitation is, you can find another way. Another thing in a similar sense is time. So, if you want to turn that big thing around in the next 2 days, it's probably not going to happen. But if you can plan it into your roadmap, it probably can. Another thing that we've found actually that's quite a good lesson for us and our clients is that stakeholders can also be a limitation. So it's not uncommon for us to get quite far down the line with something, and then a new stakeholder kind of pops up, and they weren't interested previously, but all of a sudden they're like, oh, what's going on over here? So that can be a limitation, and the lessons for brands and for agencies in that situation is just to make sure that you're clear on who all the stakeholders are from the beginning, and that you're clear on what success looks like, and that you don't end up having people jumping in halfway through and changing things around.
Speaking of jumping, am I right? Do I remember rightly you were involved in the Honda jump years ago?
That was my boyfriend, actually, who was in the Honda jump.
Yeah, he was involved in the Honda jump. So for people who don't remember, there was a live broadcast skydive with people spelling out Honda in letters in formation skydiving, and you just think, well, the number of people had to get behind that, and it wasn't just planned overnight, and the budget and the attitude to risk and all of those things. How many people had to sign off on that? A big kind of extravaganza like that doesn't just happen, right? And it was pretty impressive at the time, and people did talk about it. But I guess the other big one in that joint background world of ours was Baumgartner and the Red Bull jump that we were talking about earlier, and just how many years of planning and sign off and just horribleness. And yet someone watched it. There have been so many other people who've attempted to do that without really knowing the implications. It's got to be a big global brand with big ambition, as you say, to pull off the biggest stuff.
And that's such a good example. And just to use the Honda example again, so that skydivers built the word Honda using their bodies over the skies in Spain, and it was for a live broadcast advert, and it was really, really cool. And people look at that and go, well, it's only a minute long, so that's not that much effort, is it? It's only a minute. And knowing the people who were behind it, I know that they did 8 jumps in the run up to it to practice it. So it's only 8 jumps, and then it took a minute. So it's not that much effort. But prior to the 8 jumps, they also had to practice it on the ground and put all their bodies on the ground and make sure they could do it. So that's not too much more effort. Then there's the guy who had to actually work out how to spell the word out. So that's, again, a little bit more complexity. But then there's also the years that went before that into getting the sign off. I know there was a lot of risk assessment. There was everyone working out how the equipment was going to work, how the cameras were going to work, how the live broadcast would work, how the weather was going to contribute, like so many things. And I think that really mirrors the way that our work as digital PRs in particular happens, because people will see the output of what you've done and a campaign going live, or somebody celebrating a campaign on social media, and they'll think, well, that can't be that much effort. We can probably do that. But nothing happens quickly in our industry, because every fantastic campaign has either been the output of a huge amount of work for that campaign, but it's also been the output of the years of experience that team has had to get to that point. So there's been lots of examples where people, will walk up to my team in the office at Impression and be like, oh, hey, PR team, can you just have a quick idea about this thing? No, like there is no such thing as a quick idea. Even if we come up with an idea like that, we are only able to do it because we've immersed ourselves in this industry for many years before. So I think that's a lesson for all brands, is that it might look like a minute long skydive at the end, but it's years and years of effort that goes in, and the same is true of campaign work.
Definitely. So what are there any kind of key strategies you're pitching to clients this year, of all years, 2021? Really interesting year, let's call it, exciting year. Possibly the phrase has been used, but are there any kind of core things that you're going out to clients and saying, listen, you've really got to get on this year?
Yeah, for sure. So for me, the really big one is changing consumer behaviours and how brands can best respond to that. So over the past year, the global pandemic has kept us all in lockdown. We haven't been able to kind of rely on passing footfall or on our ability to kind of advertise to people outside of their homes. So the onus has been much more on brands to be able to find a way to reach us in our homes. And that comes with a whole new world of complexity, because people don't want to be reached in their homes unless it's for good reason. And we as marketers don't deserve to be in people's homes unless it's for good reason either. So we've had to learn to be more sympathetic, more empathetic to what our audiences and what our clients' audiences are looking for. We've had to be much more sympathetic to the messaging that's going to resonate with them. And we've had to recognize that the techniques that we employ that might seem like quick and simple marketing techniques have actually got a lot more power than we realized. So one of the things that I am kind of talking to my clients about moving forward is how can we use digital PR, for example, to open communications with our clients? How can we use it as part of starting a conversation that will eventually lead to a sale, for sure, but is not about selling to them immediately? And there are complexities in technology that will define the way that we take that and the rate of growth around that. Attribution, for example, is a challenge for our industry. How can you attribute something that happens so high up the funnel that it doesn't immediately lead to that conversion? How can you measure that through? I know that Google's been kind of doing a lot of work with Google Analytics on how it can improve in that sense. But also I think brands have to recognize that it's not just about that bottom line conversion, and being open to exploring opportunities around micro conversions or kind of different touch points is really what's going to help brands to thrive moving forward. So yeah, that's what I'm really pushing on one side, is how can we use PR techniques to open conversations, but also, and this comes back to what we spoke about at the beginning, how can we best understand and define our own purposes in a way that is going to enable us to do good in the world as brands? That's something that's become more prevalent than ever before through the whole pandemic, and the influence that we have, especially brands who've got those kind of bigger platforms and bigger followings, can't be ignored. So I think for all of the clients that we're working with, we're really trying to get to the bottom of what those values are, what the purposes are, and how PR and purpose can work hand in hand.
Brilliant. So 2 kind of core areas for people to consider. Is
For
there
sure.
one top tip you'd give?
One top tip, I think, be
A quick
open.
idea, maybe?
A quick idea. Thanks very much. I think be open to those opportunities. It's very easy because we've grown up in this digital world, and we know that digital marketing is more tangible than any other form of marketing. We can measure everything so much better. We've almost been a bit spoiled by that, I think. And though we should always aspire to make things measurable, we need to prove our value and the value of the investments that we make. I think we've also got to be open to those opportunities that only arise when you're not desperate to measure every single thing. And thinking about how you can open conversations means better understanding of your audience and better understanding of your own brand and purpose. So yeah, that would be my tip, is just be open to exploring things beyond that bottom line conversion.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Laura. Some really, really good advice, and fascinating hearing about everything going on at Impression and your plans for the year. It's been great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. See you next time for another episode of Exploring Digital with Purr. Thanks for joining. Remember to subscribe and follow us, and to share today's insights with other businesses you know who want to stay relevant in a digital-first world.